Coming up on the Mindful Midlife Crisis.
It's a really good thing. And seeing a whole wave of dads, for example, in the dad space who want to be the stay-at-home dads, and they want to be there with their kids and teach their kids ways of dealing with emotional distress and being open and stuff like that. I tried it for a little while, and it was amazing to be able to spend more time at home with the kids and stuff like that and challenge those social constructs of men have to be the breadwinner, men have to go out and work, and the wife stays at home and all that stuff. And the more we can challenge this stuff and talk about it openly and honestly, and I think the better that our future generations will be. I think this is a time where we're starting this mental health conversation, and the more momentum we can get, the more we can normalize discussions around mental health, which is great what we're doing now, which is normalizing a mental health discussion. It's not behind closed doors. It's going to be open for the whole world to hear it. The further we can progress this mindfully masculine guy for the future.
Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis, a podcast for people navigating the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. I'm your host, Billy Lahr, an educator, personal trainer, meditation teacher, and overthinker who talks to experts who specialize in social and emotional learning, mindfulness, physical and emotional wellness, cultural awareness, finances, communication, relationships, dating, and parenting, all in an effort to help us better reflect, learn, and grow so we can live a more purpose-filled life. Take a deep breath, embrace the present, and journey with me through the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Welcome to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. I'm your host, Billy Lahr. Thank you for tuning in wherever you are. The purpose of this show is to provide a platform that gives people the space and permission to share their expertise and life experiences in order to help others navigate the complexities and possibilities of life's second half. And remember, this free and useful information is helpful to people of all ages. Wisdom isn't about one's age. Wisdom comes from our ability to reflect, learn, and grow from our own life experiences while also learning from the experiences of others, regardless of what stage of life we are in. And you just never know what life is going to throw at you. So there just might be a story or two from these past episodes that help you feel better prepared for the challenges you might face in life or that you're facing right now, whether those challenges be your emotional, mental, and or physical health, your relationships with others, including your partner and your children, your career, whatever curveballs life is throwing at you right now, just know that you are not alone in your experiences, and the conversations I'm having here are with people who have been there before or have done the research to help you navigate these situations with more awareness, openness, curiosity, and compassion so you can live a more purpose-filled life. So, if you're looking for some ways to help you better navigate whatever you've got going on in your life from someone who's been through it before, check out some of our other episodes at www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm breaking this week's episode into two parts because my guest and I, we had a lot to talk about when it comes to men's mental health. And as you can imagine, if you listen to my episode 66 rant about Chelsea Fagan's comment where she said, no more men talking mental health on podcasts, I decided to double down on this conversation of men talking mental health on podcasts. So in today's episode, my guest shares his mental health journey battling OCD, anxiety, depression, and alcohol abuse. And then next week, we're going to talk about how his experiences have led him to devoting his life to being a social worker, providing mental health services to men, and how he counsels men, particularly fathers, who are struggling with their mental health and having a hard time opening up about it. All right, let's meet today's guest. Our guest today is Simon Rinne. Simon is a husband and father of two based in Australia along Queensland's Sunshine Coast. Simon is the founder of Mindful Men, a therapy practice that is dedicated to supporting men with mental illness and disability. Simon's passion for mental health comes from living with obsessive-compulsive disorder, depression, anxiety, and burnout throughout the last 30 years. 2022 marks 10 years since Simon finally opened up and got help for his mental illness, and he is here today to share his story and inspire other men to share theirs. So welcome to the show, Simon Rinne.
Thank you, Billy. It's good to be here, mate. It's good to catch up again. It's been a few long weeks since our last discussion.
Yeah. So if people want to check out Simon's podcast, Simon has a podcast called Mindful Men, and I was a guest on there, and you can check that out. It was a lot of fun talking to you, and like we just kind of carried on for a while, and it was a fun conversation. It was a lively conversation, so people can check that out. And I think today is also going to be just as spirited and informative, especially for men out there who may be hesitant to talk about their mental health. And I know that that's something that you're passionate about, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. But we always like to have our guests talk about the 10 roles that they play in their life. So Simon, what are the 10 roles that you play in your life?
You had me thinking on this. So I always say husband first because my kids, I usually say dad first, but I'm trying to train my brain to say husband first because I met my wife first and then I had kids.
wait, why? How come you're training your brain for that?
I don't know. I just don't want to disappoint my wife and think that I've put the kids before her. So
and it's okay to disappoint the kids?
They're not old enough yet to really understand.
That makes sense.
Maybe at 20 years I'll be disappointing them. I'm not sure because they're only little. They're only 3 and 5. So
they don't care.
Maybe they're equal. They're equal. Number one. And then I'm a social worker. I like to consider myself a mental health influencer because I do a lot of social media stuff with mental health and men's mental health, and it flows into the next one, which is a men's therapist as well. So I work specifically with men, trying to help them to open up about mental illness. The next one's an interesting one. I'm a therapist in therapy because there's a lot of stigma and shame around people who are therapists, like psychologists, counselors, social workers, etc., who are also getting therapy themselves. And there's a lot of shame around that because they feel like they have to be strong mentally to be working in the mental health field. But there's a lot of us actually who, need help as well. And I value my role as a therapist, but also the value the therapists that I work with personally as well. So I like to put in that. Now, the next one is a great one that we had a chat with on my podcast. I'm a closet Mariah Carey fan. Mariah Carey, and she comes out, we're recording this in December 2022. So, she's all over the radio with her Christmas songs at the moment. So it always reminds me of the very first CD I ever owned, which was a gift on my birthday from a friend from school. And it was Mariah Carey's Daydream. So I always have a bit of a soft spot for Mariah Carey. I'm a sports fan. So Australians, very, sports mad. I love my Aussie rules footy. I love my soccer. We just watched the World Cup here, and basketball, golf, you name it. I love it. And my kids are going to hate this when they're married, but I'm the best daggy dad dancer that the world has never seen. It wouldn't be a party if we didn't bring out a chair at some point on the dance floor.
So, all right. So there are going to be a lot of terms that are used in this episode that are going to require some sort of explanation because this is a mostly American audience right here. But what the hell is a daggy dad dancer?
A daggy dad. Well, daggy is like the goofy dad, like the dorky dad that nobody wants on the dance floor, but he's waiting for that moment, that song, and then he gets that little bit of a jiggle in his backside, and then off he goes, and the wife is like, "Oh my god."
What's funny is that's one of the roles that you're most looking forward to in the second half of life. So not only are your kids going to be disappointed that you've put them second now as you've retrained your brain to look at them behind your wife as less prioritized as your wife, but they're also now looking forward to you embarrassing them, particularly at their wedding.
Absolutely, and that's in like 25 years' time. So there's a long run up.
Well, that gives you a lot of time to practice, or is it more important to just go in cold so then it's really embarrassing?
Oh, you definitely have to go in cold. Yeah, there's no practicing. It's not those flash mob things where all of a sudden everybody's in sync. It's just me. Just interpretive dance is a good word for
it. Oh, fantastic. So you're also looking forward to being a husband and being a father, and we've talked a little bit about this. Why are those roles that you're looking forward to in the second half of life?
I guess because I just put them as number one and number one, They're my world. My wife is my world in terms of
both where we've come from and, our journeys together, but also my mental health journey, which is a huge part of my life. She was the one that encouraged me to go get help in the first place, and it's really supported me through the last 10 years particularly. But also the kids. My kids are my world, and I love watching them grow up and trying to shape them into a human being that, can make some good in the world, and also hopefully impart some wisdom along the way. And hopefully I get the invite to the wedding as well. So I've obviously done a good enough job there as well. So they're the reasons. It's pretty simple stuff, really. But they are the world that I live in, and my world does revolve around them. So,
Well, and we talked about in the conversation that we had that we're calling on men to seek out mental health help, but also encouraging their partners to, encourage them, to get them to say, hey, you're really struggling. You're not really you. You're not the person that I first met. And it's not in a good way. You're not growing. And obviously, that's a really tricky conversation to have because men get on the defensive. So I'm curious, how did you respond to that when what did your wife say, and how did that impact you? Were you defensive? Were you like, that's not what's going on here? Or were you aware of, yeah, you're right, and thank you for pushing me in that direction?
yeah, this question has me reflecting on a few different relationships in my life. I remember the first few serious girlfriends that I had, like late teens, early 20s and stuff like that. And even though at the time I had undiagnosed mental health issues, tried to bottle it up with alcohol and suppressing the thoughts and the emotions, tried to not think about them or tried to outthink them as well in certain ways as well. But often those relationships would end because I found them trying to put me into their box about what an ideal partner would look like and be like. And that really conflicted with my mental health. As someone who's depressed, someone who lives with anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, there's certain ways that I think and feel and behave, but they were trying to stuff me into almost like a triangle into a square hole or something like that. It just wasn't going to fit. And so when I met Rachel, and she was the first person who really just kind of accepted me for who I was, I didn't feel like she was trying to fit me into her box about what an ideal partner would look like. But it did get to a stage where I wasn't showing up the way that I would like to show up. I was really depressed. We'd moved from where we met to her hometown in Tassie, and I just felt really isolated and alone and down, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And initially she did say, oh, maybe you should go get some help because you're drinking too much. And I was, like, a lot. But I was deflective at first. I had the brick wall up and said, no, I'm not going to do that. Maybe you've got issues. Maybe you need to go get help if you can't deal with what's going on. But deep down inside me, I also had this bit of a shame around medication. I didn't want to be one of those people that was on daily medication for the rest of their lives, because I saw my parents, particularly my mum, she would have a whole bunch of pills that she would take every day, and then you'd see it with your grandparents and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's just not a life that I wanted to live. So I thought I would do what most guys do, and I'll go for a run, try to outrun it, and try to get healthy, have a health kick, drink a little bit less. Did that for a little while, didn't really work, and then a year later we're having the same discussion. And it was at that moment where I go, okay, maybe there's some truth to this. I've been deflecting for a long time, not just that year before, but I was deflecting internally for a long time, saying nothing's wrong with me. That was the moment where I said, okay, I think I do have a problem. I need to go and talk to my doctor and start this process of what mental health is, what recovery is, and what that looks like as well.
Was this before or after you had kids?
Oh, well before. So this was 10 years ago. So the kids are only, Gussie's about to turn 6, Pip's about to turn 3. So yeah, this was 10 years ago. Rachel and I have been together since 2008. And so this was around, 2012 that this was all happening. But it was so good to do it, actually. Like, it started a 10-year process of recovery and finding what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And I found mindfulness on the way, which we'll talk about a bit later. And I'm a big believer that, like, knowledge is power. Even though I was diagnosed from that initial discussion, I got a referral to a psychologist, got the diagnoses of depression, anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder. And a lot of people say, mental illness labels don't define me. They don't. That's not who I am. But I really do, in some way, think that what does define who I am, because it helps me understand what's going on inside my brain and the way I behave and the way I feel a lot of the time. And then from there, I can develop strategies to really work through the anxious periods or depressed periods, or even little things like just having the inspiration to go talk to someone and the courage to go talk to someone, which is a huge one. And now it's so normal in my life that just like most people would go see a doctor if they hurt their leg or their back or whatever, get a physical injury, I'm just as ready to go say, okay, yeah, I need mental health support, and I'll go see my doctor or a psychologist, counsellor, a social worker, and work through whatever pain I was going through at the time. So it's quite a normal thing for me now. But yeah, it wouldn't have happened without Rachel's support, and then her support along the journey as well. It's also about the honesty and openness about how I'm tracking ongoing, and her support for me to go get the help when I need it and stuff like that. Because it is a bit of financial burden for a lot of people. It's not cheap to go see a psychologist, and my psychiatrist. I went to a psychiatrist this year to do a medication review, and that was like $500 just to go see someone for half an hour or so. So it's not cheap, but it's high on my priority list, because if I don't do it, then I'm not in a good space. Not the best husband, not the best father that I can be. And it's a work in progress as well. I never get it right. But as long as I'm working towards health and well-being, that's the most that I can do.
Well, and it's that idea that mental health is health. You go get a physical every year, or at least you should anyway. We don't really have mental health protocols because general practitioners really aren't great about identifying mental health issues because they're not really trained in that. And so I talked to Tandra Rutledge about this, man, I feel like we need to have some sort of mental health checklist, just like you do when you have a physical health checklist, right? Like you hit 45 and you get your prostate exam, and for women, you go in, you get mammograms, that sort of thing. I feel like we need to have a mental health checklist. So that's one thing that I'd like to work on as a project. So, you might get recruited to help me with that, because your story and your experiences have shaped a lot of the work that you're doing now. So what I want to do is this: we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Simon is going to share how his experiences have shaped the work in creating this Mindful Men movement. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. If you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, giving the show a quick 5-star review with a few kind words helps others find and benefit from this podcast just like you are. Finally, please spread the wealth of free knowledge and advice in this episode by sharing it with the people in your life who may find this information and my mission to help others live a more purpose-filled life valuable. My hope is that these conversations resonate with others and inspire people to live their best lives. Thanks again. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. We are here with Simon Rinne. He is the host of the Mindful Men podcast. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts. Simon, you're a huge advocate, particularly for men's mental health, and you've been quite vulnerable and open about your own mental health journey. You've talked a little bit about that journey and what you've learned about yourself. Tell us a little bit more about how you've learned to manage your depression, your anxiety, your OCD, your own recognition of it as well.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, and mental health journeys are a work in progress, and it wouldn't have happened if I didn't open up about it. We're talking a bit about before around mental health checklists and all that type of stuff, but you're never going to get through to be able to do one unless you're open and honest and say, I've got an issue here. So I guess I'm at a point now, I'm 39, 40 next year, where I'm at a point where I've learned that it's not weak to speak. I've learned to be able to take off the mask and go, okay, this is me. This is who I am authentically, 100%. Because for a long time, I wore a very good mask of mental health. Nobody would know internally that I was really struggling. I was down, highly anxious, highly stressed, all that type of stuff, because you wouldn't have seen it. Like, you look at me and talk to me, and it would just be Simon's just doing his thing, but internally I was a completely different person. And so at this point in my time as a dad, particularly, I think the fatherhood has really brought it out a bit as well. It's like, I want to be the best person I can be for my kids, and being the best person I can be is being really 100% authentic. But it comes from a few different areas. I mean, I finished my social work degree last year. Social work is a great degree for anyone who's interested in learning how to critically reflect about life and identify who we are as a person within within the micro family units or household units, and then how the broader community influences how we operate as well in different environments. So that's been something that's been really useful in terms of my mental health journey and understanding where I'm at, but also where I've been from as well. And so I guess the story starts when I grew up in a place called Adelaide, South Australia, the northern suburbs. The geographical location is a lot of people on welfare support or low socioeconomic people. A lot of people work in trades, manufacturing services style roles. So it's not exactly a wealthy area. It's probably on the lower end, low income, middle class as well, some of those pockets. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So this is a time before social media, before internet, all that type of stuff. And so my world was informed by this environment that I lived in, which can be rough in certain suburbs and streets and so forth. But also like the household, so I had 3 brothers plus dad, so a very masculine household. We played Aussie rules football as well. If you think of American football but without the pads, that's what Aussie rules football is. It's quite a brutal sport, a lot of injuries and so forth. And you can get hit by any direction as well. So you think about a big oval of 18 players per each team, and the ball's flinging around all over the place. It's not like NFL where you've got 2 teams facing each other and going at each other like that. It is 360 kind of game. And so in this kind of environment, like influenced by my brothers, influenced by my teammates, my coaches, if you get hit on the football field, you've got to brush yourself off, pick yourself up, and off you go again. Because if you were someone who, might cry on the field, if you got a big hit or whatever, you'd get targeted. The big kids on the other team will look at you and I'm going to get this kid again because it's fun to hurt a little kid. But the same with your coach. If you weren't playing as the coach would want you to play and as hard as the coach would want you to play, you get a spray or you get yelled at in front of everybody. And it was quite demeaning and stuff like that. And that happens still today in 2022, and it's happened throughout history. But for me, I was quite a sensitive kid. So if I did get yelled at, it would really cut down to my core. But then like I would also try to hide the tears if I started to tear up. And so I'd have those kind of influences. And I love football. I love playing it. I wasn't the guy or the player who would be the one that would be on the bottom of a pack getting crunched by 10 guys. I'd be the guy on the outskirts using my speed to dart around and to avoid getting tackled, essentially. And then after that, we'd go home and we'd watch things like wrestling. We'd watch WWF wrestling, or we were more keen on WCW at the time. Or we'd watch, my older brothers would watch the Terminator movies or Rambo, Die Hard. These were common movies in our household. And so I quickly developed this idea of what it meant to be a boy, and to be a man was to be tough and to suck it up. And, you think of Die Hard and the Terminator, you're getting shot or stabbed or, limbs cut off or whatever. But the hero, he picks himself up and carries on regardless. There's no tearing, there's no crying. But for a sensitive kid like me, that kind of clashed as well. Like I was like, how does this work? How do I navigate the world when, the world's telling me that to cry is to be feminine? Like, and the 80s and 90s, if you were crying, say, in the schoolyard or even at home, like someone would say, oh, don't be a wuss, don't be a girl. In some circles, it was don't be gay. Like these were things that you would label with if you were a boy who showed any sort of emotion. Like many boys and men, and particularly the men that I work with, I bottled it up and I didn't talk about it. Didn't know how to talk about it. Mental health wasn't even in the dictionary, I don't think, back then. And so I just tried to go about my day as being as masculine as possible with quite a sensitive internal workings in my system. But up until around 8 years old, I was pretty happy-go-lucky. I was pretty, a larrikin. I didn't take much to heart. But then I developed obsessive-compulsive disorder and my world changed. And internally, I was quite a mess. I didn't know how to process what was happening. I didn't know what was happening, what this thing was. And it wasn't until, I was 28 and got diagnosed that I can go, oh, that's why I thought the way I did. That's why I behaved the way I did. And for anyone who's not sure what OCD actually is, it starts with an obsessive thought, which can be quite intrusive. It can be quite scary, quite demanding on the mind as well. And to alleviate the distress that's caused by that obsessive thought, you perform what's called a compulsive act or a compulsion or a behavior. And the behavior is meant to just to negate the thought and help you feel back at baseline again. So my entry into OCD started it was around 8 years old in the schoolyard. Another student said to me, Simon, if you don't use your voice for more than a minute, you're going to lose your voice forever. And I'm like, I thought that was the gospel. I thought, wow, this guy knows science or something. what he's saying is true. It's going to happen. In order to make sure that my voice was always working, I would be constantly humming to myself. I'd be like, like that kind of hum. And all day, every day, for about 2 years, I would do this. And the purpose of the humming was to alleviate this distress and to check that my voice was still there. And then over the years, it kind of morphed into more serious versions of OCD. So in my teenage years, mum and dad separated, and me and my little brother went with mum. And we're still living in that geographic location where it was quite, there was pockets of crime and stuff like that, and some dangerous areas. And all of a sudden it became this man of the house, this notion that you're the man of the house. I remember like TV back in the 80s and 90s would often say, oh, who's the man of the house? Kind of like Married with Children and all that type of stuff. You've got Ed Bundy, he's the man of the house. You've got Home Improvement. Can't remember what the guy's name was. It Tim Allen?
Tim Allen, yeah.
He was the man of the house. And all these shows, like even the Cosby Show, like, Bill Cosby, he was the man. Like, these are the things that we watch on TV. And it's like, I'm like, okay, now I'm the man of the house at 13 years old or something like that. And so this is where OCD went into overdrive. And so I'd spend 3, maybe 4 hours every night checking that the house was locked, because I was fearful, overwhelmingly fearful, someone breaking into the house, stealing our stuff, kidnapping us, murdering us, stabbing us, all sorts of things. And so I would go around in a routine. And obsessive-compulsive disorder, you do things in routines because that's how you manage through it. So, for example, it might start at the front door, then progress to the front windows, and continue around the whole house, making sure that any possible entry point was locked, secured. I'm not the kind of guy that would go to bed with a window open to get the nice fresh breeze, because that would just petrify me. Even today, I would not do that because I just worry that someone would break in, unless I was like up in a hotel room, like 50 stories up or whatever. There was no possible way for someone to break into the window, but I'd probably still think about it as well. So yeah, 3 to 4 hours a night doing this. And I'd do the routine of checking, and then it would also include checking like the appliances were off. So like the iron, the stove, the oven was off, because I also had this fear of the house burning down while we were sleeping. And so I'd check all this stuff. I'd go to bed. Then my brain would say, did you really check that window? Or when you check that door, it somehow magically unlocked. So off I'd go again, do the whole routine. And it wasn't just that window or that door. It was the whole routine again, because it has to go in routines. Someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder does this repeatedly until everything feels just right. Okay, the windows are just right. The door's just right. The way that this curtain's draped over this window is just right. During these times, I was doing this for hours and hours and hours, but then on the way to school, I'd pack my bag and I'd have my wallet and my keys particularly, but also my school books as well. And I would check, have I got my wallet and keys? Because if I lost my wallet and keys, if I lost my wallet, it had my address on my identity card or whatever. So they'd have it, this baddie person in my head, this mythical person, would know where I lived. And if they had the keys, they would have the means to get into the house. And so I would check my bag that I had my wallet and keys. I would zip up my bag, put it on my back. Then my brain would say, Simon, did you really zip up your bag? And so I'd take it off, do it again. And then I put it back on. And they're like, Simon, in the process of checking, did your wallet or keys fall out onto the ground and you forgot to check? So pull it off again, do it again, check the ground, do this constantly all day, every day. And, that lasted for a good 20 years, that particular one. I still do it a little bit today, that one, but nowhere near as bad as particularly my teens.
So it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I've done stuff like that. And it's not obsessive, but it's certainly I've closed up something and I'm like, yeah, but is it really in there? Let me take a look. For me, it's almost like this level of paranoia that, is this in here? Is this thing that I absolutely positively need in here? As you were talking about that, I was like, oh man, I've done stuff like that. And I know that I'm obsessive about things, but when I hear people talk about OCD, we've had you on talking about OCD. People can go back to, I believe it's episode 62 with Brian Pyatt. He also talks about his battle with OCD. When I hear people talk about their OCD, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not at that level of obsessive compulsive to where it's a point of disorder, but there are hints of it in there. And as you were talking about that, like my blood ran a little cold because I have absolutely done things like that where I'm like, well, no, did it fall out? I better check. Just re-zipping and zipping. So, that was that was a bit real right there. That really resonated with me.
And for most people, they can just do it once and that's it. Like they just check, and that's natural. Like I've heard people say, like I used to drive back 20 minutes when I got my license, drive back half an hour, 20 minutes to check again. I could be late. That could make me late for work or for school.
Okay, I feel a little better because I've never done that. So, like that piece I know I've never done. So, okay.
But there's other things like when I got my license at 16, so 16 and a half here, you can kind of, back then we could get our P plates, which means we could drive without a parent or an adult with us or whatever. And when I got my first car, then it turned into the car stuff as well. It turned into, is the handbrake up fully? Because if the handbrake's not up, the car could roll back and cause, someone to die or car accident or drive into someone's house or something like that. Because if it's on a slight hill or whatever, even that, and like where the light's off in the car, because I've had this fear of breaking down. And this is before mobile phones. So if you broke down in the middle of nowhere, you'd have to trudge, kilometers to a pay phone or knock on someone's house. And I would never knock on someone's house because of the anxiety around, social anxiety that I had. And so I had this overwhelming fear that if the light was on in the car battery would go flat. I didn't have money to get a new battery or to call someone out. So I didn't know. My OCD mind is constantly processing risks and versus rewards or dangers or inconveniences to the nth degree. Like in an OCD brain, you 100% believe that if you don't do all these checking things, particularly for me, and it's not for everyone because there's lots of different types of OCD, I constantly believe, and a lot of people do, is that it will happen if you do not do the behavior. The 100% thought is going to happen. Your thought's going to happen. And so, to the car and where I'd go into work. I remember I used to go to work all the time or school, and I'd be in class and I'd have to say, can I go to the toilet or whatever? I go in the toilet, I'm actually going to go check my car. It hasn't rolled down out of the school car park or out of the work car park and cause mayhem, and the police and all this are looking for me because I was irresponsible with how I parked my car. Like all these things would go through my mind constantly. In my teenage years, this is where I guess I call them my darkest days because all this was happening. I was exhausted. Also trying to go to school, socialize, hide under the mask as well. So I'm living this double life. And I remember, putting my head on the pillow and saying to myself, I hope I don't wake up. I hope I suffocate and don't wake up again because I'm just over this. I can't do this anymore. I'm trying to outthink it. I'm trying to solve it on myself like most men do. They try to fix themselves in whatever ways. But then something told me, like, Simon, like no matter how dark today is, the sun will always rise tomorrow. And I don't know where this came from, but it's become my little personal mantra and affirmation for when I'm in my dark times. I say to myself this because I think I associated the sun as a new day, a new chance to do things differently, or even just also on many times it was the sun associated with just checking a little bit less because I didn't have to worry about the nighttime routine. All of a sudden I was in the daytime, so I'm like, I can relax now. It's funny when you say mental illness stuff out loud, sometimes it sounds really ridiculous, but I like to use humor. I laugh at myself as well. Like it does sound like losing my voice sounds stupid. To me, but in my mind as an 8-year-old, it was 100% true. But like saying it to myself, like I did do all these things, and I still do a lot of these things today, like at 39. But I just know how ridiculous they are now, so I've got more control over it now. But I said this mantra to myself, and it became my little thing. And I guess that was the initial point where I started reflecting inwards, going, okay, something's not quite right. But I didn't confront that until I was 28 and got the help from the GP.
Well, it sounds like you thought that alcohol was going to be the thing that slowed down these thoughts. I think a lot of guys either turn to alcohol as a coping mechanism or they just never outgrow the alcohol phase from their college days. They just keep it going because they don't know how to slow it down. That's what happened to me all the way through my 20s. I just never figured out how to be a social drinker because
Yeah.
it was just always balls to the walls. I was going to get blackout drunk every weekend, and I didn't know how to drink socially. Like if I was going to have a drink, then I was going to have enough drinks to where I was just unruly, obnoxious, outrageous, that sort of thing. It never allowed me the opportunity to be reflective or mature. It stunted all of that social emotional learning, that growth that could have happened during that time. And so when you were using alcohol in order to slow your mind down, it's interesting because it's almost like you had this awareness that, hey, there's something going on here. Maybe booze is going to be the fix.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because Australia's got a huge drinking culture. Like it's huge. And, you see alcohol advertising a lot. And, even on our sports team, like as I said before, we're mad on sports. And so like sports teams would have alcohol branding on it and stuff like that. And it's challenging here because we're legally able to drink from 18 and buy alcohol from 18. And so our drinking often starts around 16. We start getting, the guy that can grow a beard early or whatever can walk through the bottle shop and pick up some alcohol or whatever. And so it's ingrained really young. And for me, it was two things. One, it was socialization. It was being part of the crew and having fun and all that type of stuff, but also being able to relax as well. So, a drink, and this is probably where the dad moves came in. I have a few drinks and the body starts to be flexible and I can start to learn dance moves and all this. And you associate all this stuff with drinking and getting drunk. And there's an interesting thing. A lot of guys have a saying here. I'm not sure what it's like over there, but my wife doesn't get it. But we say, I'm going for a beer, and a beer actually means a couple beers. And then if you say I'm going for a couple beers, that actually means not two, but it's like 4 to 5 beers. Or if you say I'm going out drinking, you're going out and you're going to get smashed, basically. You're going to get drunk. And my wife's like, what do you mean? It's like, isn't a beer just like one beer? But I could never associate that with one beer. I could never just have the one beer. Like you said, I could never drink socially. I had to drink to be social. And that was a lot in my younger days, like in those late teenage years when we're partying all the time, every weekend. I didn't go away for uni, but I hung around people that like to drink a lot. So that just became a normal part of my life. Every weekend would have a carton of beer or whatever and go through that. And so everything was normalized in that sense. And then as I grew older, then I'm like, okay, I'm stressed from work. I need to go home and drink and then feel relaxed and stuff like that. But as I got older, and it was around that 28 years old, that I'm like, yeah, maybe I am drinking too much. But I never really nailed that on the head. I mean, you talk in yours about having a sabbatical away from alcohol. And I never really did that. Like the longest, aside from like this current moment, so we're recording almost before Christmas, but like I haven't been drinking since the last, say, 3 months or so. That's the longest I've ever like not drank since I was 16. And I think now as a dad, again, this is where the dad stuff comes out. Like my drinking, my kids started talking about beer. And I'm like, oh, they're really noticing me sitting down and drinking a beer. And do I want them to associate dad with drinking beer on the couch by himself, watching the football on TV? Like, do I want that? Every now and then's okay, but is that like an every weekend thing? Like, should I be doing that as a dad? Is that the best role model I can be for my son, if he's going to be tempted to this? And my daughter as well. And so there's a lot of reflection that comes as you get older, but you've got to, for me, I had to go through a lot of pain and hurt and silence and trial and error and all that type of stuff to get to that point of reflection. Initially to get the diagnosis, but then also as I get older, so as I get to 2020 when I experienced burnout, I really dived into therapy properly. Like in the 8 years before that, I was hoping for the magical fix, the magical pill from psychologists and doctors that would fix me, but I never did the internal work. But then 2020, I experienced burnout. And I started to do the internal work. I found mindfulness practices through my therapist and started to really apply the homework because I needed to. I was physically, emotionally, mentally spent. I had to have 4 to 5 months off of work and just work on me and self-care and filling my cup again. And it's there that I go, okay, maybe alcohol is part of this. The social work study helped me identify some of this. So I start to learn about alcohol and the impacts on society and intergenerational trauma and the way that capitalism and consumerism can really influence us at the micro levels and stuff like that. And so these all came together and I'm like, light bulbs started going off. I'm like, okay, my journey is the way it has been for these particular reasons, like we've talked about, like where I grew up and the influences around me. And then also this whole masculinity culture around bottling stuff up and all that type of stuff. And mental illness as well, so the stigma and shame and all that associated. I think when I think back on COVID, like it did a lot of damage in the world, but one of the good things it did is it helped prompt people to talk more openly about mental illness. Because in Australia, we were locked down for 5-6 months at a time in certain areas. Particularly that first one was a long one. And then Queensland, where I live, we went through multiple lockdowns. I think Melbourne and Victoria went through some of the world's longest lockdowns. And it just sparked a whole bunch of mental health conversations. And from there, I can go, yeah, I'm taking off this mask and I'm joining this mental health bandwagon and just putting myself out there. And that's where Mindful Men started. It started as a social media campaign just to talk about my story, but then it blossomed into the therapy business that I do now since I finished my social work degree. And I'm kind of connecting the dot. Like I remember being in my late high school years going, I want to work with people like me. And what I meant by that was people with mental health issues, but I didn't know that was a mental health thing. But I never got there, and so I went on this roundabout 15-year career in a job I hated. Well, not a job I hated, but a career I didn't really like and didn't connect with. But yeah, finishing the social work degree and starting my own private practice, I think connected that dot of wanting to work with, guys with mental health issues. It's a long, windy story, but yeah, like we get there in the end, and I think that's a mental health story. It is windy, and it some days you feel like you're just going backwards, but you eventually do get there if you just got to have patience with it.
Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. New episodes come out every Wednesday to help you get over the midweek hump. If you'd like to contact me, or if you have suggestions about what you'd like to hear on the show, visit www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com and click Contact Us. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter to get free weekly meditations as well as free resources from our Reflect, Learn, Grow program. You can also click on the show notes for links to the articles and resources we reference throughout the show. If you want to check out my worldly adventures, follow me on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis. My hope is that my trials, tribulations, and successes will inspire you to take intentional action to live a more purpose-filled life. And while you're at it, remember to show yourself some love every now and then, too. Thanks again. And now, back to the show. So then now as you are navigating this work as a licensed social worker, how do you separate your own experiences from the men you work with so that you aren't intersecting your journey with theirs? Or do you find that sharing your journey gives you a bit of street cred with those guys?
So there's elements where street cred does help because guys like to feel inspired by the people that they work with. And even in my own therapy practice, like my own personal therapy, the therapists that I connect with are the ones with shared experiences. So the one I had with burnout had experienced burnout as well. So I could really just talk the language and they could really understand what I was going through. And so if a guy talks to me about depression, I can say, man, I've been there. I've been suicidal. I know what it's like to feel low. But good therapists, and I really take pride in this, is not overwhelming them with your story because it's their story. They're paying you to listen. You're not taking their money, but then sharing your story. And so I leave a lot of that to the podcast and my social media stuff to share my story so that I can say, look, if you want to hear more of my story, just go to my podcast. But in therapy, it's all about them and what their thoughts are and what they're experiencing. They can ask me for my opinion or strategies I've personally used, and I'll tell them. But I do just separate my therapy. I leave my story at the door and I only bring in snips if I absolutely need to because it is their story. But it does give the street cred. The street cred is really important in mental health because if you can find someone who has shared experience of what you're going through, it helps you connect with that therapist more. And you're probably going to do the homework if they have that shared experience. Whereas if you just got someone with textbook smarts, they can tell you all the tools and tips in the world, but if they don't tell you it, if they don't haven't walked in the shoes, they're really only 50% there. You really want someone who's 75%, 80%, 100% with you. And that's the purpose of when anyone's looking for a mental health therapist is shop around. Like You might start with one and you just feel a disconnect. Maybe you feel like they don't really get you. Just say thanks, but I'm going to try and find somebody else who does get me, because they're the ones that you're really looking for. They're the gold nuggets where you can get some great work done. And that's when I bought into the mindfulness, is when I found someone who was really into mindfulness like the way I was, and that kind of practice. And he was like a Buddhist monk, and I just wanted to go and sit on a mountain with him somewhere and do mindfulness all the time. But we had our little snips and stuff like that, and he was gem. But it took me a long time to find someone like that, someone who kind of could just speak my language, give me tools that I bought into as well. A lot of it's trial and error.
Well, it's interesting because I shared my own mental health struggles in episode 3, so way back at the beginning of this show when our production value was incredibly terrible. But when I shared that story, I got a lot of text messages from guy friends who were like, thank you so much for sharing your story. It got me thinking about a lot of things, and it made me think about how, some of the things that I've been thinking about, some of the things that I've been going on. And it actually inspired one of my friends to share that episode with his brother. And then the two of them came on the show. This is episode 11 with Scott and Lee Moritz. The two of them came on the show and they talked about how that episode opened up a conversation between the two of them about Lee's mental health struggles. And when you hear stories like that, it's like, man, that's why you create the show, right? And I imagine that's why you do the work that you do, because you've seen action being taken by men as a result of your vulnerability, your willingness to open up. When I was on your show, we talked about this podcast. It's a 6-part podcast from my hero, Henry Rollins, where he traveled around Australia having these tough conversations with various men from the land down under to discover what tough actually means and how tough has evolved. He was really kind of highlighting sort of this mysticism of the toughness that is often thought of when we think of the Australian outback, right? So do you see much of a difference between how men in Australia are raised to address their mental health and how other people from around the world are raised to address their mental health? Because like we've said, there's this ruggedness that we associate with men from Australia, men from the outback.
Yeah, I guess one of the things is most of us don't live in the outback. We all live on the coast. We're all a bit like, East Coast particularly, we're all a bit surfy and all that type of stuff. But it's an interesting one. But since I started the podcast as well, like the Mindful Men podcast, and I'm having conversations with people just like you across the world, like it's actually quite interesting how we can be separated by land and sea, and even in different decades as well, grow up in different decades, but we all share very similar journeys in terms of particularly men, like the bottling up thing, about bottling it up, not sure how to talk about it, not sure how to express it and all that type of stuff. So it's actually quite a common response that I'm seeing both in the podcast, but also in the work that I do in the therapy practice as well. But in the mental health space, what's really interesting is we often feel like we're the only person in the world experiencing what we're experiencing. Like for me, OCD, like they call OCD a silent condition or a silent disorder. It takes on average someone between 13, 15, 17 years, depending on what literature you read, from first symptom to first treatment, because they're trying to outthink it, out-be it in their own body. And for a lot of people, it's quite distressing. They don't want to talk about it because they fear the response that they might get for talking about something. So, for example, if you have like harm OCD and you have thoughts of stabbing someone because you're holding a knife, it doesn't mean you want to stab someone. It's just a thought you want to stab someone. You try saying that to a GP or a psychologist or something like that. If you're worried that they might, child safety or child protection might come and take your kids away, or your wife might pick up all her gear and just leave because she's worried about her safety. It's one of those things that can be really challenging and hard to talk about. But once you do start talking about it, and I've heard this so many times in my own personal recovery, particularly when I started approaching my OCD in my own therapy, is how many times psychologists, counsellors, GPs, or people in general have heard the stories before.
Well, I was just going to say, it's incredible that you use that example about the knife, because in that episode of Brian Pyatt, he uses that exact example. He talks about when he was a kid, he remembers having that thought of, what if I picked up this knife and stabbed my mom? And then very quickly he was like, wait a minute, but I love my mom. Why would I do that? But then that intrusive thought was there. And so it's just so incredible that you use that as your example right there.
Yeah, and I haven't listened to that episode, so maybe I'm psychic.
Amongst all your other mental health superpowers, right? You also are psychic.
It is what it is. Maybe I've got to start a new podcast, The Psychic Side. I'm not sure. But that's the thing, like for me, like living with OCD, it wasn't until I started my Instagram page a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, from my burnout recovery as a way of just talking about mental health, that I even discovered other people in the world live with OCD. I found all these people. I just started searching for other accounts to follow. I might try and see if there's other OCD accounts, and there's millions of them. There's huge amounts of people living with OCD. It's like we're actually one of the most common mental health conditions. But we always talk about depression when we talk about mental illness, but OCD is quite common. And so I'm like, oh, wow, like if I didn't start this Instagram thing and start sharing my story and then just got curious and started diving into OCD accounts on Instagram, I would have never found these people, and I would never have probably found exposure and response prevention, which is the therapy is apparently the gold standard for OCD treatment. So it's like comes under the umbrella of cognitive behavioral therapy, but it focuses less on the cognitions, so the thoughts, and more on just preventing the behaviors from happening. So preventing you checking the doors and windows or checking the handbrake or driving back home 20 minutes. It's all around focusing on that. But it all comes from being open and discovering what it means to be a man, what it means to be tough, and accepting vulnerability in our lives and going, okay, maybe there's something not quite right here. And I guess not conforming to this notion that men need to be tough and emotionless and stuff like that. Like that rugged outback guy who, in fact, when we think about the outback, there's so many guys out there in rural and regional Australia that are struggling, like farmers and all that. They're isolated, they're lonely. They're disconnected from the world, from technology. Like they can't even access internet and stuff like that. Healthcare providers.
So that's what Henry Rollins was trying to highlight, is these guys that are out there and dealing with isolation, or these guys who are out in the outback and who are gay and really can't live authentically. When I think of the outback in Australia, I think about the American West, because the American West, states like Wyoming, states like Idaho, those are really isolated states because of the Rocky Mountains. It's rugged out that way. Wyoming has a population, I think it's less than 1 million people. It's a huge state in terms of landmass, very few people. So people are spread out all over the place. Unfortunately, there is this middle-aged suicide epidemic that is taking over the American West that we're really not talking about. And there are no resources that are available, or the stigma and shame that surrounds men's mental health, particularly if you're someone who has been a rancher, if you are someone who has been a laborer, like many in the American West. There's no way that you would feel comfortable or vulnerable enough to check in with a therapist, because what does that say about your masculinity? This isn't an attack on masculinity either. I think it's important for people to go back and listen to the episode that I did with Pradeep Sangha, episode 67, where we talk about the complete man, where he talks about wanting to cultivate more mindful alpha males. And he promotes masculinity. But an aspect of masculinity is your awareness of what's going on with you and your environment, and then having the capacity to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's all of those things entwined. And we think about our farmers, particularly, like, in outback Australia, we've had drought for years, like decades, it feels like drought. We've got the lineage of like the kids are moving away from regional rural Australia to live on the coast because there's just more opportunities. the money's not there to continuing the family farms and all that type of stuff. And so these men particularly, and women as well, they're feeling the isolation. They're feeling like I've got to carry on and be this masculine version that I've grown up with. And a lot of it's enshrined in the way that we were brought up by our parents. And it's no attack on our parents either. Like, I don't sit back and go, my mum and dad did the worst job raising me. They just did the best job that they knew that they could. Like, they didn't know. Mental health wasn't a discussion that we had in the 80s and 90s. So why would they talk about mental health? Like, why would I talk about it? Because didn't even know that those words went together. I knew about physical health because I played football and stuff like that. And if we got injured, I want to get back on the footy field as quickly as possible, but certainly not mental health. And so, these generations of people in the outback, people on the coast as well, like I think it's 80 or 90% of Australia's population lives on the coastline. And no matter where you are, like there's a lot of people experiencing this and not sure how to talk about these types of issues and unwilling in a lot of cases because of that fear of what other people are going to say about them. So I think it all comes down to just it's hard because I remember 10 years ago, me going in and saying, I think I've got a mental health issue to my GP was going against all the grain that I learned growing up on the footy field or in the household with three brothers and dad or watching Die Hard and Terminator. It just goes against all that grain because I was saying, I've got some vulnerability here. I'm not this postcard version of whatever masculinity is meant to look like. But I liked how you were saying it's around trying to develop these mindfully masculine guys. It's a really good thing. And seeing a whole wave of dads, for example, in the dad space who want to be the stay-at-home dads and they want to be there with their kids and teach their kids ways of dealing with emotional distress and being open and stuff like that. I tried it for a little while and it was amazing to be able to spend more time at home with the kids and stuff like that and challenge those social constructs of men have to be the breadwinner, men have to go out and work, and the wife stays at home and all that stuff. And the more we can challenge this stuff and talk about it openly and honestly, and I think the better that our future generations will be. I think this is a time where we're starting this mental health conversation, and the more momentum we can get, the more we can normalize discussions around mental health, which is great what we're doing now. We're just normalizing a mental health discussion. It's not behind closed doors. It's going to be open for the whole world to hear it. The further we can progress this mindfully masculine guy for the future.
Well, one of the areas you focus on in your social work is fatherhood. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then we come back. We're going to talk to Simon about how fatherhood impacts his own mental health and how fatherhood challenges him to be a better father in terms of managing his mental health, and what advice he gives to fathers in order to manage their mental health. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Hey, if you enjoyed this week's episode, you may want to check out these other episodes as well. We've got episode 2 where my good friend and old co-host Brian on the Bass and I discuss research from the Samaritans Project about what factors may be driving middle-aged men to suicide, which is an important topic to discuss because middle-aged men have the highest rates of suicide in any demographic. And quite frankly, I don't think people are talking enough about this mental health crisis for middle-aged men. You can also listen to episode 3, where I share my story of navigating my own mental health crises using mindfulness as my guide out of a life of despair. You can check out episode 5, where Brian on the Bass shares his struggles with alcohol. We also have episode 11, where we talk to brothers Scott and Lee Morotz about how this very podcast help the two of them open up to each other about their mental health experiences. Be sure to check out one of my favorite guests, episode 22 with Tandra Rutledge, where we discuss how to prioritize and normalize mental health conversations with our children. We also had on Michael Mosher, episode 46. He shares his mental health journey. And then finally, we talked to Brian Pyatt in episode 62. He talks to us about how OCD has impacted his life and how he uses both meditation and medication to balance out his mental health. You can find links to all of these episodes in the show notes, or you can get them wherever you get your podcasts. All of Simon's contact information, including links to his mental health services, are also available in the show notes. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple listener, leave a 5-star review with a few kind words. And if you're a Spotify listener, click those 5 stars under the show art. If you'd like to share your thoughts on this week's episode, you can find all of my contact information in the show notes as well. Feel free to email me your takeaways from this conversation at mindfulmidlifecrisis@gmail.com. You can also follow me and DM me on Instagram at mindful_midlife_crisis, or you can send a message to the contact page at www.mindfulmidlifecrisis.com. And while you're there, feel free to sign up for the newsletter so you can get access to the free meditations I send out every Sunday. Finally, I know Simon and I would greatly appreciate it if you would share this episode with the people in your life who may benefit from Simon's expertise and life experiences. The purpose of this show is to help you navigate the complexities and possibilities of life's second half, and we hope this conversation provides you with some insight to help you reflect, learn, and grow. So, for Simon, this is Billy. Thank you for listening to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. May you feel happy, healthy, and loved. Take care, friends.